Hello and welcome to the Dungeon Masters Guild House. This is a weekly podcast in which I, your host, Matthew Whitby, sit down with people all across the tabletop, RPG, and surrounding space. This week, I'm delighted to be joined by the man with the blurry background, none other than Eugene Marshall. Hello.
Hello, I'm good. Thanks for having me.
No, thank you for joining us from the void.
Yeah, I'm speaking to you from Limbo right now.
Nice.
Actually,
no, I must admit, I think there's something kind of haunting or scary about seeing things that are just blurry. Like I think that there was I remember there being like old kind of folky horror stories about someone who like just a blurry man who, like, even if they're like only like 20 feet away, they have that kind of ominous blur around them.
Well, it's also kind of how your brain registers objects in your peripheral vision, right?
Yeah.
So when you just catch a glimpse of something, you turn and it's maybe gone. That can be creepy, but you only see it a blur, right?
I mean, also, I myself, as a bespectacled individual, I'm used to seeing blurry things.
Right, here it is.
Yeah.
Yes, the world is very scary now. I've taken my glasses off.
Yeah, no,
but still scary. I put them back on.
No, that's just you having to look at me. That's fine. So, for the people listening, horrifying blurry people aside, what sort of product have you been creating? You know, what have you been putting out in the world?
Well, I guess the thing for which I'm most well known right now is Ancestry and Culture, an alternative to race in 5e, which I put out last year and is up for 3 or 4 ENnie awards currently. Since then, that was the launch of my press, Arcanist Press, and my publication company, and we've put out 4 or 5 more books that are kind of building on that product and extending the line. In addition, I've got some an adventure and 3 or 4 supplements on DMsGuild, and I'm also working with my friend ENnies of Sigil Entertainment to put out both Savage Worlds content. We've done a couple of Kickstarters of that. And most recently, a thing called S5e, which is super heroic role-playing for 5th edition, which we just Kickstarted last month. Those are the things I have done. So looking into the past, right? Yes. But I guess Ancestry and Culture is like the one that I'm known for best.
Well, it's like a busy bee and a half. It's literally there's all manner of things that you've kind of been getting up to. One thing I always do like to kind of start is like, so what was the product that you kind of started the whole adventure with? Was it literally bang out the gate with Ancestries, or?
So if we're talking about starting as a creator, well, do we mean professionally? Because I've been homebrewing content for years, just like many of us. Yeah. I started professionally, I guess you'd say, in 2017, 2018, when my friend Aaron, the aforementioned Aaron, invited me to do, actually, we were playing in a game of Vampire the Masquerade together online. And he's a publisher. Sigil Entertainment's been working in the industry. He's been working in the industry for 20 years. And he was putting together a little supplement of NPCs for World of Darkness. He's going to sell on drive-thru. And he liked my character, so he's like, why don't you write up your character and publish it? And the deadline's blah. I'm going to have all the players in this game do that.
Yeah.
I was the only person that turned mine in on time. So he said, well, do you want to write up some more? So I did. And then I was still the only person who turned him in on time. And it kept happening. So I ended up writing like 2/3 of that book. It's called Denizens of Darkness. And then after that, he started launching these Savage Worlds products called Savage Zine. And they're like anthologies of Savage Worlds content. Think kind of like Dragon magazine or something, right? But for Savage Worlds. So we put out a couple of those, and I wrote about maybe half of each of those.
Wow.
And so that included across, I don't know, maybe 2 or 3 distinct settings and half a dozen adventures. All right. So that was a fair amount of content with him. And then I created Ancestry and Culture and launched my own line and had him kind of help. He did layout on it, for example. But Ancestry and Culture was the first thing on my own kind of under my own banner.
Yeah.
But I'd put out, I don't know, half a dozen things prior to that with him.
Wow. I mean, yeah, it sounds like your entire professional journey kind of started just by being punctual.
Yeah. It really is. Just showing up and doing the work is you're halfway there, right? That's how you get a good reputation. You do work on time of at least a decent quality, and a lot of people they just struggle to hit the deadlines.
So I guess as well, because in kind of chatting, it sounds like you've kind of worked, again, from just kind of a publication standpoint, you've kind of worked across multiple game systems as well. And was it typically kind of the journey that you would kind of like an avid player, and you were kind of taking inspiration? Again, it's so easy to take inspiration from your home games because that's where the ideas are sparking every second.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I got back into gaming, so I kind of took a hiatus for grad school and kids and stuff. But I mean, I started back in like 82 and gamed up until the early 2000s, took a break, came back in 2014 with 5th edition. But I've always played more than just D&D. So I take a lot of design inspiration as well as just creative entertainment from other systems besides D&D, like the Storyteller or Powered by the Apocalypse or Savage Worlds. And so I delight in putting out content with all kinds of systems, both for my home games, which are, again, across all of these different systems, as well as for publication.
I must admit, I think that there is like that kind of like aha moment where you kind of grok another game system, where you understand its strengths and weaknesses, and you can kind of see how like a particular story or product kind of meshes with it. And then it kind of I don't know, to go almost like, I was about to say, to go like Super Saiyan is the point where you go beyond that. I'm like, okay, well now that I understand this system, what can I maybe like bring across to like others? And then you kind of end up with, there's kind of journeys where you end up with like all sorts of manners of rules and new systems.
Right.
One thing,
just go ahead.
No, please.
I was just going to say, like, the thing that for me, right, is that different game mechanics, when they're well made, which many of these systems are full of, create a feeling in the players at the table. And you'll be playing one game, and then you'll play another game, and you realize this is a kind of feeling I don't have when I play game one.
Yeah.
I wonder whether I could create that feeling in game one using some of the ideas and systems, right? So you have to port them over. But for me, it's always about like, what's the player experience at the table? And then I just, I really, people have praised Ancestry and Culture and other things, and that's great, but I'm really more of a remixer than a creator. I like to pick and choose and then combine things in new ways. And so playing in other systems is key for that for me.
So then I guess as you kind of have gone across your journey, then it sounds like you have kind of dabbled across, again, because you started with writing characters, you've kind of moved across kind of system design and stuff like that. Is it the case of like you just kind of enjoy everything across the spectrum of like design, or was it more the case of like, well, I guess like now at this point, would you confidently say, oh yeah, no, I'm like, well, I guess like I don't want to say systems designer, but I guess in your own terms, like a systems mixer. is that
right.
That title?
It is now. So I mean, I'll tell you. So a lot of creators that I have a huge amount of respect for, including, hey, yourself and other people on the DMsGuild,
sure.
Right? One of the things that's quite impressive that I don't do, but that many of you do, is create narrative content. We're talking about worlds, characters, story hooks. That's great. And I can do it adequately, but it's really hard. It's an uphill battle. Mechanics, on the other hand, just come naturally to me for some reason. I really think in those terms. I could speculate as to why. It's probably related to the fact that my day job is as a philosophy professor at university. So I'm always like working through complicated systems of thought and figuring out how these concepts fit together. And so it's just kind of like, it's like thought engineering. And so I just go and look at game systems, and it's a very similar feel to me. But telling a story, like, I'm no novelist, I'm no filmmaker. I can't say things about cool characters. So I prefer to work on the systematic mechanical side. And so pretty much anywhere that kind of phenomenon shows up, I'm excited to engage with it, but not just for its own sake. Again, I like to think about mechanics as facilitating experiences and stories. So for other people to tell, like, you've got the good ideas for the stories. I'll just create some tools so that you tell them in a better way.
I mean, like, okay, so I don't think I've ever heard the necessarily comparison between I guess systems mechanics and philosophy. So I think it's good. No, it's an interesting kind of very, and also the kind of very like apt description, because I guess it is that kind of that ongoing kind of discussion, and I suppose not easier in terms of mechanics, but being player focused in terms of like, okay, well, what is the end result coming out of this? Again, I'm going to show my lack of understanding of philosophy as a whole. So I feel like there's not always necessarily an output of philosophy in terms of like some of the kind of I was about to say cyclical debates, or
well, I mean, if you spend a long enough time in role-playing game forums, you'll see cyclical debates, period, right? So, I mean, like when people are arguing about interpreting the text, I mean, to me, that feels a lot like either like are a bunch of philosophers arguing over about what Plato said, or I don't know, like Talmud scholars arguing about religious texts, right? I mean, there's this like hermeneutical element to it. But I mean, but the issue is that like philosophers and many other disciplines do work with a lot of kind of conceptual structures and frameworks and theories. And one of the big challenges is getting it to work together like a logical, coherent system. And so thinking about like, how can I take this abstract concept or process and make it output a result I want? We can be talking about how I can take my theory of ethics and make it produce the actions I want it to, or, you know, I don't know, how I understand the world makes sense to me.
Yeah.
Well, it's in a way, I mean, when I sit down to do game design, I'm like, well, how can I make this system of race in D&D more inclusive at the table, right? So it's one thing to just say, make it inclusive. Well, like, well, what does that look like mechanically to create that experience without, of course, bringing all the bad stuff that bad mechanics can bring, like bogging things down and needless complexity or obscurity, or they can be inconsistent and contradictory. You don't want any of that. So that's the challenge, making it smooth, elegant, easy to use, but also create the experience you want. So that's the trick.
I think because there is that careful balance with kind of like system design, is the fact that obviously sometimes going through the process of giving mechanics and rules to certain systems can also be almost like too many levels of abstraction. It's like the point of like, I don't like that, going back to Player's Friends, I don't feel like I'm playing a ship right now. I feel like I'm playing a Cassell. I have all these numbers I'm keeping track of, which I'm sure for people who play, was it EVE Online? I'm sure they love that. That's the
right.
But
right. Well, that's one of the advantages of playing other systems as I have, especially in the past 5 years. The kind of indie game communities have just continued to grow and produce really fantastic, streamlined, more narratively focused content. So playing Powered by the Apocalypse games and other story games really have, let me just be honest with you, I'm a very busy person and I have a day job and I have kids and a spouse who also has a career and so on and so forth. I don't have the time anymore like I did in the 80s and 90s to sit down with a 500-page rule book and just churn through it so that I can optimize my character with the chain of feats a la 3.5 Pathfinder or Palladium or one of those older systems. I don't have that kind of time anymore. So I want my games to be, I want the rules to be transparent and quick to pick up. And I want to create that experience for players too. So if I'm going to do a system for race or anything, it needs to be like, you got to grok it immediately. Otherwise you're not doing it right.
There is that kind of like that ongoing balance between like weighing up like complexity and depth. And that the two are often kind of like complicated together in the fact that obviously you can make a really, really like deep game in terms of option by making it exceedingly complex. But the challenge is to have a very simple game that has like in some way, you know, I guess that was the appeal of 5e as a system, is because it kind of smoothed on a lot, you know, smoothed off a lot of the sharp edges.
It's a Goldilocks for sure.
Yeah. But yeah, no, geez, yeah, there's I imagine, yeah, there's no kind of end of it. But again, you've kind of alluded to it a few times, and I feel like we should probably address the I was going to say the elephant in the room, but I don't know if that makes it sound. But no, Ancestry and Culture.
Yes.
I guess kind of like you kind of touched on before because of the kind of problematic aspects with, again, going back to like 5e of I guess character creation and the way they handled like races. What would you say is like, I guess, the kind of driving force of like, this is something I want to make? Or
honestly, and you know, this is really important. I've said this online and in other forums many times, but I didn't identify the problem, right? I learned I didn't know about the problem. Playing D&D in the 80s, it didn't occur being a white person in America, Midwest, right? Suburban Midwest. I basically grew up in like Stranger Things. I was that age and everything, right?
Yeah.
I had no clue that there was a representation problem. I mean, so I really had to learn in the early, actually, when I came back to gaming in 2014, from people like, James Mendez Hodes and Graham Barber and, Orion Black and Tanya DePass and Gabe Hicks and all these fantastic people that are working every day to see their own identities represented at games, and people like them not be excluded. So I learned from them. And I just was trying, and people were messing with trying to solve it, right? So on D&D Beyond, James Hake and Tristan Tarwater each posted like attempts to fix this. I just thought, because everybody's other attempts, there's a bunch of great ones, but I was really leaning into that. Like, how can I make this as simple as possible, easy and like just plug and play as possible, but still accomplish the goal?
Yeah.
And so I sat down and just came up with something, showed it to a friend, and Ed Silver, thanks Ed, and he said, you should publish this. And so I'm like, really? So I showed it to my other friend Aaron, who publishes stuff, and he's like, sure, whatever. There's the Zine Quest Kickstarter coming up. It's really low bar of entry, right? You could create it, just set a couple $100 goal and buy some cover art and you're done. So I did, but it blew up, right? Yeah. So I really owe it to those people that have been working kind of in the trenches, mostly people of color on these issues. And then, because I learned about the problems from them, I just happened to come up with one kind of clever-ish insight on how to solve the problem, because that's my headspace, is how to solve these complex problems with simple answers. The best word is elegant, right? That's what MT Black called Ancestry and Culture, which is my favorite kind of like plot it received, because that word elegance, like in a scientific theory or in math, means, really does the powerful thing, but does it as simply as possible, which was always my design goal. So I was pleased to hit that.
Was this also kind of like, again, was this kind of your first foray into like the world of Kickstarter alongside?
No, because I'd participated in a couple of those Kickstarters with my friend Aaron. So Savage Sign, we'd Kickstarted the previous year, the previous summer, I guess. And that was pretty successful. And I had helped out, because he, in his job, like Sigil Entertainment is his side gig. Yeah. His day job is running art direction and many of the Kickstarters for Pinnacle Entertainment.
Okay, so
Savage Worlds. He also worked on Torg and Seventh Sea and Deadlands. And so I just have been coattailing on his experience a little bit.
So then I guess the kind of the one of my more immediate question then is, do you think like the overwhelming success of the Kickstarter helped kind of shape the product at all? Because I imagine, interesting, and kind of expand on that, like in what way do you think it did?
So one thing that happened when the Kickstarter was making money, I realized that we could do things like bring in an editor, right? And so I decided, you know what, I want to go all in on this. I was really excited about how it was making money, and I really wasn't. I'm very privileged and fortunate enough to have a day job. So I don't need the money right now from a Kickstarter that I thought was kind of a one-off. So I'm like, all right, we're going to go all in and buy a really nice piece of cover art and get a really great editor. So I got Hannah Rose, because she had just finished working on the Wildmount book. And, so she's a real pro, and she really helped it. But then the second thing I did was hired Daniel Kwan to do a consultation to help me kind of shape it as I was writing it. On kind of sensitivity and cultural issues. And he had a fantastic insight. He has an academic background also, right? And in anthropology. And he said to me, like, hey, you're a college professor. You should take this opportunity. Don't shy away from being like a little, instructional or pedantic here. So he kind of suggested that I write this introductory essay that justifies why I think this product is needed. And I actually think that made a bigger probably impact than the actual system itself. And so, I'm grateful to him for suggesting that. So those are ways in which like getting some other perspectives, really helped me transform the product into something that was both more powerful, thanks Daniel, and also much more professional looking, thanks Hannah.
So it didn't feel like Daniel was giving you essay homework at all?
Well, only, I mean, yes, but in the way that like a good colleague does to another colleague in a scholarly world. You know, you're like, you know what you should write, and you're like, thanks, that's an awesome idea. That's a wonderful thing to get an assignment like that.
So. But I must admit, it's that kind of like fascinating thing of like, you know, like when you watch a film and like you're so enraptured in the film that you're like, you know what, I'm going to watch it with commentary on. Yeah. And you get all these kind of designerly, you know, directorial insights that you wouldn't have otherwise. And as designers, especially of like systems designers, you don't get to, you just present the rules in the most elegant way possible. You don't get to like hey, side note, this took like 3 months, or you know, or like this is the 20th iteration of this, which I guess is having like that kind of I don't know. I feel weird calling it an essay now, but like having that kind of upfront as literally to like, this is why we're doing it. This is why we need it.
Yeah, I think that's right. That, I mean, look, in an ideal bit of design, all of those labors that went into making it the product it is should be, in the words of one of my grad student advisors, left behind on the workroom floor, right? And so, yeah, that's right. You don't want to show your work in that way, right? Although every once in a while, it is interesting to play with that. Like it's also super interesting to hear why. Like, because I remember, for example, the first time I really had this clued into me, a little anecdote here, is I'm watching, I'm kind of a sci-fi and fantasy movie buff as well. So I was watching Tarkovsky's Solaris, which is the 70s science fiction. George Clooney did a remake with, anyway. So, and there's this weird scene near the beginning where it's a Russian film. So there's this Russian cosmonaut, he's retired, and the government guy comes in. You've seen this scene in 100 films. You got to come back. You're the only one who can do it. And he's talking about how there's this space station that they'd lost contact with. And they give this big info dump, right? They're like, here was the last broadcast. And he watches it. And it's like, they've found alien life, but now we've lost that connection. You need to go out there and find out what happened. Then there's this scene where the cosmonaut's like, let me think about it. And he gets in the car and the camera is like sitting in the back seat. And you just watch the guy drive home. And it's like 5 solid minutes of just the highway. Yeah. And I'm like, what is going on with the scene? I'm watching it like at home on like, you know, DVD or something. So I like skip ahead. I'm like, no, he's still in the damn car. Nothing's happening. Right. Yeah. Later, I read an interview with Tarkovsky, and he said, well, I put that scene in there. Somebody's like, what is up with the driving scene? So I put that scene in there because I had just given the viewers a bunch of information, and in the theater, you can't pause it and think about it. So I needed to give them time there to process the information before moving on to the next film or the next part of the film, because I was going to be using that information in a very critical way to explore the character. And I didn't want them getting confused about the plot. I wanted them to focus on the character. So I gave them time to process and digest that before moving on. And I was like, it's kind of blew my mind that it's like such a meta way of like presenting information. It's like, you know, that you're in a theater and the person. So, I mean, like, this is the kind of thing that way of thinking about design that's like, okay, well, this sounds nice on paper, but what would this look like when 2 people are sitting at a table talking to one another about it, right? You got to kind of play it out in your head and say, is this going to communicate what I want in the actual act? As it's like, to use, like, I guess, a tabletop RPG example, while people are gathering around the table, like grabbing the D30,000, they're like, this seems really cool on paper, but now we have to wait 30 minutes for it to stop rolling. Yeah, exactly. Or I've got it. Tell me how familiar this sounds if you've ever done design work. Okay, so the guy rolls an attack. If you hit, then the target has to make a saving throw, or they take this additional damage. And then, you know, and you just, like, the more cool stuff you add, like, every turn takes forever, right? Yeah. And, you know, that's just like, there is such a thing as too much, right? And with cool stuff in design. So you got to kind of like, well, what does this look like exactly? No, I kind of played. I kind of love that anecdote. It's I guess it's my mind immediately goes to like, I don't know, like, my mind is like, did he do any like screen, like, I'm curious if he did any screen to work out if that actually is like an effective method for people to kind of like work out the plot, or is it the case of like, most people like, we've heard the plot, I've kind of forgotten it, and now I'm fast forwarding past the casting because I want to see some aliens. Right. Geez. So then I guess, I mean, yeah. Oh no, super. I love that story. No, I love it. I'm good though. That's good. That's funny.
So then I guess now again we're chatting now. We can peel back the curtain a little bit. Was there anything that kind of through the, I guess, iterations of Ancestry and Culture that kind of shaped it, or was it pretty kind of close from the get-go?
So the point when I created it, my design goals were two. One is to create a scenario that takes their essentialism out of race and birth, right? I didn't want orcs to be born savage and menacing. I wanted that to be something that they might learn in certain contexts if they wanted. And so that's why separating like the learned traits into a culture and the obviously inherited traits into ancestry, like dark vision or water breathing or wings or whatever, size, age, those are obviously inherited. But, you know, almost all the other behavioral stuff, the proficiencies, that's all learned. Language. So that was pretty easy. And then that was the goal. And then the second goal, of course, was to do it in a way that was just literally plug and play. Like that if somebody didn't want to use the system, it would be easy for them to, there's not a speed bump, right? There's no friction points. You're like, you want to be an elfy elf, take elf ancestry and culture, boom, done. Moving on, right? Easy. And if you want to be a dwarf raised by elves, then you just take this and that, boom, done, right? It's no, you don't have to do math or anything, right? So that was the design goal. But then I realized after I had finished designing it that, it wouldn't be hard to add at the end a rule about mixing ancestries, right? So like, well, it's easy. You just take one trait from one ancestry and one trait from the other ancestry, and you've got a hybrid ancestry. Yeah. And that allowed me to create characters, not just that was a human raised by elves like Aragon or a human raised by dwarves, like if you know your Terry Pratchett, like Carrot Iron Founderson, right? It also allowed me to create someone who is the child of like a tiefling and a gnome, or the child of an elf and an orc. Yeah. And actually, I think a lot of people have resonated with those, maybe even more than the Ancestry Culture mix and match. And so like the art, so when I realized that during the Kickstarter, that's when I directed my spouse was playing, kind of occupying the role of art director. So I said, hey, art director, let's get some art that depicts this. So like the cover art depicts a bunch of people of not just maybe their ancestry and their culture are divergent, but they're of mixed ancestry. And that's actually ended up, those mixed ancestry pieces of art, because of the mixed ancestry mechanic I added as an afterthought, ended up being as powerful as anything to do with ancestry and culture divide.
I don't know what it is, but no, I'm 100% with you. I think just like there's like anytime I'm sort of like doing character work and stuff like that, anytime I don't, it's always something like cute and quirky about like a mixed, and like the idea of like, a Goliath and a dwarf kind of like lovingly doting on each other. And and the idea of like, now that there's the kind of the rules in place to kind of support their children, which sorry, continue.
No, I was just going to say, yes. And the thing that the thing that I'm happiest about, really, I mean, apart from the, like, maybe the way in which it might make the hobby just a little bit more inclusive, is the fact that it's super simple to adopt, but it actually ends up bringing a huge amount of narrative richness that I didn't really expect. Yeah. Right. Because when you're creating a character and you're like, okay, human, that's all you've got to say. It's like, well, what does that mean narratively? What does that mean for your character's backstory? It could mean anything. Yeah. It's really bland. Or even elf, dwarf, gnome. Like, well, okay, you mean, stereotypes come to mind. But if I tell you I'm a gnome, I'm the child of a gnome and a halfling raised by dwarves, you're already like, wow, you've told me so much about the world and this person's experience. I want to know how that happened. And it just immediately, like a story starts rolling out of you. And it's so much more inviting to kind of cool character backstories and original individuals. So that's super fun to do too. Yeah.
No, I can definitely, I can kind of get behind, like, the kind of the shifting, because one thing that's kind of, I've always kind of agreed with is the way 5e kind of handles the ability score improvements kind of tied to race is I feel like is immediately thrown out the window the moment you're kind of dealing with adventurers. It's the fact that, okay, sure, halflings are small, but this is a halfling barbarian who, in about 10 levels or so, is going to be hurling boulders like 7 times the size of them. They're not, they're I don't know, they're adventurers. They're not, I was about to say they're not human. but like in that sort of like
they're not mundane
superhuman.
people. They're superheroes. Let's face it, D&D characters are superheroes. I'm absolutely, which is, oh, by the way, why I realizing that and knowing it for years was it wasn't hard to make a superhero version game that uses the OGL SRD rules, the D&D core. That was easy. Right.
Jeez. So then, wow. And then, I imagine it's kind of following on the success of like Ancestry and Culture. I guess it was just kind of planned to like, I guess, kind of expand it and kind of cover what content you couldn't necessarily cover within the book, because I guess you probably have to stop somewhere.
Well, the book was just going to be a zine. It was going to be a 32-page zine, right? And it ended up like tripling in size almost because people stretch goals. I added adventures and all this stuff. But and then after the book, though, the thing that kind of irked me a little bit is because I wanted to kickstart it and wanted it to be, I was going to put it on drive-through. I could only use the one subclass or sub-race for every race that appears in the SRD, the core. So it's only high elf and, whatever, hill dwarf and so on and so forth. So I was like, well, this is really limiting. So I just started putting out custom and kind of new ancestries and cultures in 3 or 4 books after that gives you, every analog you could possibly need for every single playable character or ancestry or culture or creature or race. And publish those. And then I ended up saying, I'm going to do even more. And I took all of the official content, all of the official races and creatures, and just use the fan content license and put them up for free on my Patreon behind no paying involved. So now you can you want to make the mountain dwarfs or using the letter of the D&D rules, you can. If you want to use my whatever rock dwarf, which is a substitute I made in one of the published books, you can do that. And of course you also get to play mind flayers or a character or a modron character or whatever you like.
Yeah, geez. Oh, I mean, I suppose at that point, you just throw anything to the mix. Leave it down to let the players kind of. I mean, just because you had left it with Illithid and like Modron, I can't imagine what sort of child would come out of that. But that's for one DM out there to kind of deal with and enjoy for the party of right.
One of the questions that came up, and frankly, I did get a lot of pushback, of course, from Ancestry and Culture, and also my continuing kind of advocacy for those issues in the community. And I got a couple kinds of pushback. The biggest one, of course, is what you'd expect, which is get your politics out of my game. We don't need this or something. There's nothing. Are you saying I'm racist because I played a half orc? No, I'm not saying that. And, like if you read the essay, it's only 2 or 3 pages. I'm not giving you major reading homework, and make it very clear. Like this isn't about you being a racist, not you, but this person. It's about just giving an option to the game that could in principle allow some people to feel more included or represented or something, right? That's it. But the second biggest pushback I got was that's not realistic because they're different species. And I said, so dragons are realistic though, right? Is that what you're saying, right? No. Okay. The wish spell, is that realistic? Yeah. Okay. So they went, and people would honestly, like I had people trying to argue with me online repeatedly, like trying to tell me about biology. Like, no, you see, when different species, and I'm like, okay, first of all, this is pretend. This is pretend, friends.
Yeah, right? You kind of just have to disarm it with love. Love finds a way,
Yeah, that's right.
When 2 people, like when an Illithid and a Modron love each other very much, and they're ready to have,
they hug each other in a special way. And then a little Modrillithid is born.
Yeah.
Anyway, so I mean, my policy is if I just put the options out there, and if GMs want to allow a Modron Illithid offspring, they can. If they want to say something like, no, only mammals and mammals, and only lizards and constructs or aberrations and aberrations only, I don't know. So you'd have to be a mind flayer / Flumph. Is there aberration? They're the only good aberration.
Beholder. Jeez.
So I've got those options. Like you could play a Mind Flayer Flumph offspring if you really wanted to. I don't know what that would look like. I mean, they've already got the tentacle face, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's in fairness, and they've got that connection of like that mind connection. I think was it like Flumps? Like they love good energy.
Yeah, there you go.
Wow, jeez.
Anyway, so now I'm gonna have to commission some art for that. But, so people cared about that stuff, but I'm just like, whatever. Just give it as it's just an option. You don't have to use it. Just like the flanking rules or whatever.
That's what I mean. I think there is a certain point that I've kind of said before that it's kind of like almost liberating as a designer to be at some point like you aren't the arbiter of fun or rules. You are putting products out there, and you kind of always have to hold your hands up and be like, do what you want with it. There with adventures, you're like, there is my kind of like intended path to it and stuff like that. But for like rule supplement, it's like they're there now. You do what you want with them. You know, if you want to allow like X parts of it and stuff like that, that's fine. If not,
I mean, a perfect example is the fact that I'm perfectly fine with somebody wanting to use my rules with Tasha's Cauldron of Everything options, or maybe they prefer an orc and an elf had a little baby, or the Grazalax's Guide to Ancestry, or Half Race Handbook, or whatever the other great options are out there. Gabe Hicks's class-based example from Itch, right? So those are, sure, that's fine. Those are all good. You can mix and match those too.
Well, actually, just because I kind of in a passing mentioned we have spoke about modrons and a little bit about adventuring. I would like to chat a little bit about Shape of Folly.
Oh, sure. Yeah. No problem.
It's the thing, like, just because again, it's quite again, one thing that's kind of consistent about your products is you do go for quite the eye-catching covers.
Yeah, I do like to splurge on the covers a little bit because I think that, I mean, just for me, I want my work to look different from somebody who's putting free content on Reddit, which there's amazing content for free on Reddit, but I my time is valuable to me, and I don't want it to be, I don't know, blown off like it's just a random forum post, then getting people saying like, well, why are you charging for this? Like I can get this for free on, I guess. Well, I mean,
again, I've spoken to a number of creators who kind of have that kind of standoffish relationship with Reddit, just because it tends to be the most, I guess, antagonistic towards, I guess, like the DMsGuild and Drive Through RPG, especially when, again, they are like blessed with the amount of kind of creators who are willingly kind of handing out high quality free content.
Yeah, I wouldn't say my attitude is antagonistic as much as mystified. I'm like, I don't quite know why. Some of those creators don't get more attention on Reddit, and like, it seems like people do well or poorly there quite independently of how well or poorly they do in other forums, Kickstarter or Twitter, or because like I've never had good reception to my work on Reddit. I'll post something and just I get pretty hardcore downvoted. So okay, well, you've made it clear, Reddit, you don't like what I have to offer. That's fine.
So to to address the modron in the room, I don't know why that's going to be my saying of the day. Address the X in the room, whatever it is. What was kind of the? I guess I mean, like I'm well, I was about to say I'm an outspoken modron fan. Was that kind of just the main of like I just want to write something about modrons, or was it where the spark came from?
So Shape of Folly was originally written as it was actually an adventure I ran a party through. I have a homebrew. I had a home game that we went from levels 1 to 20 from about 2015 to 2018, and this was just one of their chapters. But I really liked it was a lot of fun to build and run because it's kind of my homage to my favorite AD&D dungeon, which was White Plume Mountain. Right. So it's kind of a funhouse dungeon full of nonsense traps and stuff. But I wanted it, but I just, again, the challenge I posed to myself was, can I make this make coherent sense? Like what could actually, because the explanation of White Plume Mountain is there's an insane wizard and that's it. That's the explanation, right? Just like so many funhouse dungeons, crazy wizard. It's, Dungeon of the Mad Mage. That's all you got. But I wanted to say, no, actually, this is the reason why. So I came up with a story where, well, there was a mine. They discovered this corrupted, I'm giving it away, this corrupted adamantine deposit that had been kind of tainted because there was this a dwarven wizard that was working in the mine was trying to like tap planar energies and stuff. He was experimenting. And this stuff, he ended up summoning out of through this portal that he'd created modrons that were now serving him. So he had this great workforce that never tired, never complained. So he fired all his regular workers and he's like, I'll be rich and I want to share my money because they don't care about it. But the problem is that doing this, it created all this negative energy plane energy was flowing into the area, corrupting the modrons, driving him insane. And so once he died, the modrons just kept creating but without any rhyme or reason. So as you move through the dungeon, it moves from like, this is a natural environment. It's just like a place that had been a mine that had been abandoned hundreds of years ago. And, like, this ogre is layering here and there are these swarms of rats. It's just like, I tried to make it like a completely coherent ecosystem. But then as you go deeper down, you say, oh no, this is like a well-structured, well-built, in fact, incredibly well-built dwarven mine. But then things start getting weird. And as you go to the even further, all of a sudden, like you start getting like that scene in Inception or something where like
the turning corridors,
the turning corridors, and like, wait a minute, these tiles are like non-repeating tessellations that are giving me a headache when I look at them, and like there's all these bonkers traps, and my favorite trap, if I can share,
please do,
is so. It ended up just for fun. This is I don't think anyone's ever played the game and the adventure and picked up on this, but like each of the rooms are a different platonic solid shape. So like there's a pyramid, then a cube, then like a what would be, if it were a die, an 8-sided die, and then a 12-sided room and a 20-sided room, right? And so each one matches. The D10 is excluded, not included, because that's not a platonic solid.
No one likes the D10 anyway.
It's not perfectly symmetrical in all directions like the others are, right? So anyway, so it's like you could imagine the modrons who are organized in hierarchy by shape, coming up with some reason or other to think that the rooms should be built this way as you move through them. So, but one of the rooms, and then several of the rooms have like an elemental theme too. So like there's a fire and a water and an earth and an air. So the air one is you walk out you go through a doorway, and it's actually a portal to a pocket dimension that's borrowed from the elemental plane of air. So you walk out, and there's this super narrow bridge that extends like 150 feet, so farther than you can see, in this like foggy, misty area, and you look down and up, and you can't see any walls in any direction, and you know that at the far end of this bridge is an object you need to get to move forward. So people walk across the bridge or run or whatever, but there's air elementals that come, and they're tasked with pushing you off the bridge.
Oh, geez, that's nasty. That's evil.
But here's the fun thing: because inevitably somebody gets pushed off the bridge.
Yeah.
If you fall, it's a demiplane, a very small one. When you hit the bottom of the demiplane, you appear at the top again. Yeah. So you just keep flying past the bridge every other turn, right? And so the challenge then is, well, how do we get this guy back on the bridge safely?
Yeah.
Right. And there's just so many ways you could imagine somebody trying to come up with a solution. Well, I cast fly and I'll go grab him.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, he is falling at, 500 feet around. So that might be challenging.
Yeah.
Other people are like, I'll throw him a rope, and like, okay, well then, like, whoop, right.
They've reached their terminal velocity at this point. There
right. So like I've had different parties. I've run it 3 or 4 times. Like some of them are like, I'm going to try and magic this problem, right? I'm going to hold person or something. I'm going to use a wall of force to make a slide. I'm going to throw him a rope. And then one party did this thing where they said they threw the guy the rope, and after he came up, when he got to be equal to the bridge, they told him to let go. And so like they did, like somebody was doing like the physics of pendulums to be like, oh no. Because what'll happen is he'll go shooting back up, but then he'll go through the ceiling and come off the floor, and he'll reach right about next to the bridge, and that's where he'll stop before he starts falling, because that's exactly the same amount of energy, right? So that, and then we can grab him because he's just floating there for like a split second, and it worked. Yeah. So things like that.
Yeah,
I love a situation that you can give players, and you're like, man, I have no idea how they're going to solve this. I can see that there's like many ways they could approach it.
Yeah,
let's find out. I mean, that's my favorite way to run a game and to write an adventure.
I mean, I must admit, there is something about like coming up with like an adventure premise and then almost kind of working backwards from like, okay, well, this is what I want to do. How can I make it make logical sense? And then as you begin to kind of find those kind of solutions, that's kind of what inspires like more content. It's like the idea of like, okay, let's how can this dwarf make a very effective mine? Modrons, fantastic. Well, when modrons eventually take over, what are they going to do? And then you kind of ravel off, and then to kind of like from what starts as like, I don't know, like for me at least, there's like one line of like words on like a piece of paper, slowly fleshes out, and you've got like demiplanes to and the element, the plane of air to get people flying about.
Makes perfect sense, right? No, I do love. I mean, this is not new or original to me, certainly, but I'm sure you've heard this sort of idea that having that sort of like giving yourself an artificial frame, right, or structure, or limit, or challenge, for me is what creates the best opportunity for creativity. I'm much better when I'm like, well, what if I had this limit, and then working with that than just looking at a blank page, right?
So then, I guess to kind of pull back a little bit and look across your kind of, creative process as a whole, across everything that you've kind of done, has there been like a one particular design choice that you can kind of like point to and be like, you know what, I'm quite chuffed with that, if not the elemental air bridge?
Let's see. Well, I really am happy with the way in which I offered the ability to create multiple mixed ancestry characters. I think that was like, I liked the fact that wasn't my initial intent, but I saw the opportunity and was like, oh, this could be really important.
Yeah.
So I'm really proud about that. I think more recently, I was proud of the way in which I could see how to make the D&D system into serve a superheroic genre story. Yeah. So I'm really glad to have had a chance to do that. So that was really exciting. So those are probably two of my favorite right now.
If you don't mind explaining a little bit then. So what was like some of the changes that kind of the 5e system had to go through to kind of, again, because as we kind of mentioned before, there's that kind of like natural foundation that kind of says, these characters are doing like supernatural, superhuman things. But
right. But D&D 5th edition is still D&D, right? And the designers, Crawford and gang, quite clearly wanted the game to feel familiar to people coming back from old editions. So the scarcity mechanics are still quite present. You have hit points, you have exhaustion, you have, if you want to track your number of arrows and rations, you've got spell slots and how many times can you action surge and things like that. And the game is very much and has always been built around scarcity resource management. But for me, that doesn't feel like a superhero story, because I mean, imagine Hulk or Superman or Human Torch or somebody like Human Torch go flames on and he shoots fire and he shoots fire again. And he's like, I got to take a long rest, guys.
Yeah, I'm all out fire.
All out, right? Yeah. Sorry. That just doesn't, like, Hulk punches things 8 times and it's like, Hulk tired. Yeah. Hulk only have cantrips, like, that's weak. Yeah. And so, I came up with a system of, basically, at the core, the idea is that when you're low level, your cantrips are at will powers. But as you level up, your ability to use your powers at will increases. So at 5th level, you can now use 1st level powers like their cantrips. No, you don't need slots anymore. They're called reflexive powers. And so by the time you're 20th level, you can use up to 5th level powers reflexively. You can just do it all day. Now you might think, oh, that's imbalanced. No, it actually isn't. Yeah. Because as Jeremy Crawford put it, the encounter design, the encounter balance rules, the CR rules and all that were designed with the assumption that every character would use all of their most powerful abilities every combat.
Yeah.
So, and you probably have played with groups that went to long rest at between every combat, right? Yeah. And yes, if you want to create a certain sort of experience where you force them to slog through 4, 5, 6 battles before getting a rest, that's fine. But that feels more like low fantasy or realistic, gritty, grim, dark stuff. That doesn't feel like superheroes.
So then I guess that was right. One of my questions that kind of sends mind. So how do you necessarily go about, like, I guess, so if we take the Hulk example and stuff like that, but in terms of superheroes, the Hulk has a limited moveset, I would say. Was there any way that you kind of tried to go about, not feeling too repetitive?
Right. So, that was a bit of a challenge in some heroes' cases. So again, this is not something I say in the book, but this is the secret here, which is I got rid of the scarcity, took D&D, got rid of the scarcity mechanics and made everybody a spellcaster. Basically. Right. Yeah. But some of the spell castings, and that's what you do is you choose your class and you get access to that class power list. And then there's a general list of general powers which anybody can take from, right? Because there's some powers that, like, all kinds of different heroes can fly, So flight is actually on the general list, not on any particular list.
Mhm.
So the Hulk would fall under the class called kinetic, and the kinetic hero is one that you channels their powers through their body. That's strength, speed, agility, things like that. So what I did is created lists of powers that, though it may, for example, in the strength case, though they might all just be instances of Hulk being strong. I mean, if you think about it, actually, if you think about Hulk, if you've read some Hulk comics, he does. Yes, he can punch something very hard, but he also is really good at picking things up and throwing them at enemies.
Yeah.
He's also good at picking up enemies and throwing them.
Yeah.
He's also good at, he does this, slaps his hands together and like the sonic boom, right? And he also has the ability to climb up walls by digging his hands into the structures.
You know what? The Hulk does have a pretty diverse range of skills. You know what? I've been giving him the short stick. You know, he's out there. He's got like 50 moves. He's like, you know, he's got like a flow chart of what he wants to do.
And you know what? You can see this in action if you, and I will gladly admit, I've said I'm a remixer. Go play some of the Marvel video games, right? Like right now, they've got one out called the Avengers, Marvel's Avengers. And you choose a hero and you fight, you go into the ready room and practice fighting and you learn their 4 or 5 basic moves. And then you can level those moves up until they've got like 30 moves.
Yeah.
There, and all the heroes they have in that game have that. I did not steal powers from that game, but you could quite easily.
I mean,
right?
Again, superheroes are like the point of like there's easily thousands of them that you can just like you just say flying and you do hit like 50 of them.
Right. And so the challenge ultimately after that was, okay, well, how can we make this digestible? Because one thing I didn't want to do is a mistake that I think, maybe not a mistake, let's call it a design choice that other superhero games often did. So like I'm talking about Heroes Unlimited and Icons and, you know, Villains Vigilantes and the Marvel games and Mutants and Masterminds, is they really do kind of, they're very much the older style games that require you to have kind of a lot of system mastery before you can kind of make good characters. Right. And this is something that 5th edition is much better at than 3.5 was. 3.5, if you'd never read any of the books and you're just sitting down with the player's handbook and you made a character and you're like, I guess I'll take that feat. Some experienced player nearby is going to be like, no, that's a trap. That feat's a trap. Yeah. You think you want that, but you actually want these other feats. And they're like, well, those feats are lame. Yes, they are lame. But when you're level 7, you'll need that feat as a prereq. And so you're like, well, I didn't read that far ahead, right? I don't have those splat books with all those other rules. So I wanted to avoid that. So you're creating a system where you don't have to slog through 500 powers to figure out what you want. So to choke it, instead of having it be a flat decision process where you come to the powers and you're like, here they all are. It's a decision tree process where you're like, well, I've chosen my class. That limits me to these powers. I've chosen my subclass. That limits me more to these powers. Yeah. Right. And so like by having it be an iterative decision process, like a decision tree, it looks more like one of those video games where you move through the skills tree screen.
Yeah. I mean, it goes back to what we were saying earlier about like complexity versus depth that argument, not necessarily like, that argument, because the two can work in harmony in some sense. Of like it's a case of like, and a good way to avoid that kind of overwhelming like, you know, choice paralysis is to limit choices. And sometimes that's what you need to do. I think sometimes most people are like, oh yeah, we have 150 different options, and it's like, that's great, but for a first time player, that's going to be a nightmare. Yeah. So we have like, here are the quick pick choices. Like here are the easy choices. If you want a fire hero, here are the fire powers. There's, you know, choose one of these 5 or 6 or 7. And also the other thing we did away with is we just didn't, same thing as 5th edition, prerequisite service, not really important. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. I mean, you want to allow people to kind of like, you know, again, it's the idea of like mix and match and stuff like that, and prerequisite kind of hem people into kind of like, oh, you know, you've chosen the Hulk path, therefore you have to take the green requisite, you know. Green, it's and we didn't want that. We wanted people to create whatever hero they wanted. So mix and match for sure. So, and multi-classing is a thing. So, you know, they can do it that way. I can imagine that's a fun bag of worms to open in terms of balancing.
Sure. Yes.
So then I guess kind of more generally then, just kind of asking you if there is like one lesson that you would kind of pass on to, like, you know, the time travel machine opens up, you pop in, you go back to, you know, Eugene in like 2017, and you're like, you know, other than buy stocks in X, what other sort of advice do you pass on?
Wow. Okay. So I know you're asking about design lessons, but
No,
I would have so many just life lessons. Like I would like, dude, take self-care, downtime more seriously.
Yeah.
I have a workaholism problem that I use as an escape from things I don't like. And when I read the news and I'm like, this is awful. So I'm going to put my head down and create a game today. Right. Yeah. And that will work. And it got me through grad school, it got me tenure as a college professor, but it's not always the healthiest coping mechanism. So that would be a big one. I think second would be, if it's something more design specific, would be, there's got to be something.
I must say, like, just to kind of add on to like your first point. I mean, I think it is important. I mean, like, and I guess it is kind of almost understated in terms of like, self-care. And again, I'm sure there's a dozen or so people listening who are like, yeah, I'm kind of like that as well and stuff like that. And it's like it's easy to kind of fall into those habits. And I guess having that again, it is that case of like even if I had a time machine, I would probably offer the same advice. But I would be somewhat hypocritical because I'm still doing it now. I'm not like,
same here, but maybe hearing my future self tell me would have had a bigger impact than just hearing my present self tell me over and over. Cause I tell myself, I should really take a break.
I don't know.
But seeing my haggard 2021 self come back, like you have no idea what the next 4 years have in store for us. Please.
My go-to joke is I don't know what it is, but past Matt, he's an absolute dick. Just like he's always just a little bit too slow for deadlines. It's just the worst guy. But future Matt, I'm fairly sure he'll have his stuff together. I don't as present Matt, but you know what? That sounds Matt, like that's his problem.
Fair. No, yeah. So I don't really have any super big design insights. I guess the biggest one would be not to underestimate the importance of you just have to put some of your products out there. They're not going to be perfect, and no amount of playtesting and editing can insulate you from criticism, right? So that you're never going to be able to please everybody. So you might as well put your content out when you are at least minimally satisfied with it, right? It's kind of like the artist who says they never finish a work, they just kind of leave off,
It's a tough one because I guess like it's easy to kind of think of like this is like I don't think this is something that I do, but necessarily like this product that I'm making is a masterpiece throughout. I'm going to release it. I'm going to be heralded as the savior of tabletop. It's never really like that.
No. I mean, I don't think I wouldn't say I have imposter syndrome exactly, but what I do have is like, I don't know, like the Pareto principle or whatever. Like I put 80% in, and that just has to be good enough. Sorry, that's all I got, man.
No, I know. I honestly, and again, it's like the idea of like perfect is the enemy of done. And sometimes it is that case of like it's like I'm sometimes like that with not necessarily like sometimes with feature not feature size, I say feature bloat, but I meant more like content bloat in general. In that sometimes I feel like a product doesn't offer enough, that I'm always like I should just throw in like just an encounter table, just like a random encounter, just a little one that can just add that little bit of like. And I don't know if anyone's going to look at the table. It's not the point of the product isn't the random encounter table, but I'm doing it. And that way I can say that it has it.
I will say the other thing that I would suggest to my younger self doesn't generalize to most creators, which is I've more recently decided about last winter, spring, that I wanted to focus on fewer larger projects than more small ones, because I had the attitude after Ancestry and Culture came out that like, well, I guess I'm going to become a content producer here and create, and I'm thinking following a lot of the models of from really successful, wonderful creators in the DMsGuild, like I'll put out a title a month. And after 2 years, I'll have a catalog that's accruing enough, blah, blah, blah. And I mean, that is a super good way to build a career and make maybe even enough money to live on, which is a wonderful goal. But I'm not in that position to need that. So I decided that's a grind to do. And so I think I'd rather keep myself in a more creative space for longer till I find something that I'm super excited about. Yeah. Because I think I'd rather make a bigger impact with fewer titles. So that's why I'm trying to focus on bigger projects now.
I honestly, I feel like there's an ebb and flow to it. I think there is always that case of like, when you are in a big project, you're always like, I would love to do something small right now. I just want to do like a little event, just because like I'm coming off some of like the biggest projects I've ever done, and I'm yearning for something small. But I think I just have the inability to make small products. Just because going back to the random table thing, I've just got to add that little bit. But
yeah,
I sometimes it is nice to kind of dig deep into that big sort of product. But then I don't know. I think that's more of a personal thing, because I think again, it's there's no right way or wrong about it, and having a larger scale project to kind of really kind of sink your teeth in, and especially when it kind of like, again, big products, they make huge splashes to, because again, the amount of time kind of dedicated into it, and like, the quality, like, it's
well, and I also am spoiled. I really am incredibly lucky compared to most people that enter the space, in that the first thing I really put out under my own press, I even read is ended up being really successful. And so now I'm kind of like, that's the brass ring I keep reaching for. It's like, well, I want to make something that is more than just, here's some good content, which is a perfectly great goal for people. I want to be like, how can this like push the industry or the hobby or the game experience into a new place, right? And either that's politically by making the community better, or just by presenting something that no one's ever seen. That's what I'm shooting for, but that's hard, and I can't just grind that out. I gotta.
Yeah, those don't necessarily come in the shape of small, so like game jam. Yeah,
they can, but sometimes your best work can come in an improvisational moment. So,
Yeah. Oh, just like in a random tweet that is you just don't put any thought into, and suddenly it's viral. I guess I'm making that now.
Yeah. I tell you, the weirdest thing is, both in my professional career as a college professor writing books and articles, but also as a game designer, I hate to say it, but the thing that really motivates me most is anger. I get like, somebody says something or does something that I'm like, no, that's awful. We don't want that.
Yeah.
How can I make that better? How can I fix that? How can I show that guy was wrong to exclude these issues?
I get it. In no way do I endorse using spite as fuel. But if you're a spiteful individual, you might, again, like, it's what life gave you. Just work with it, roll with it. So looking at the time, we've only gone and done it. We've managed to kind of chat away the hour. But
there's so many more questions that we could discuss.
Dude, like I said, I mean, that's those. I must admit, like, even though I do have like planned questions and stuff, I do like it, like a good little like impromptu, like organic chat. But I do want to get through a few of the core major questions before going, because I do love always like having the chance to kind of shout out people who particularly inspire you within the kind of community.
Absolutely.
So this is your platform.
All right. So, I mean, the people that have inspired me I already referred to a few of them, right? Mm-hmm. So people that are working in the space, kind of putting themselves on the line to make the hobby and community better, right? So like I said, and not just in D&D, but role-playing games in general and gaming in general, like I said, Tanya DePass and the whole like Rivals of Waterdeep crew, Daniel Kwan and the Asians Represent crew, Pam Punzalan, Gabe Hicks and Orion Black, and those sorts of people are really super duper inspiring. And Jennifer Kretschmer, Sarah Thompson, I could go on and on, as I'm sure you know. So those are all amazing people. I'm also really inspired by folks who are giving of their time and wisdom without, like, in a way that's healthy and sustaining and like, fulfilling for them and the recipient. So like, there's a lot of people in the DMsGuild server that are like that. Like I know, like, Sadie is somebody that always is willing to step in and like offer advice when it's appropriate, and not and in a way that's not at all mansplaining or anything, right? It's actually productive and healthy and community building. And so when people do that work to not only lift up another creator, but do it in a way that like makes everybody feel more included or more welcome, that's a magical.
And I think it's especially in those aspects, it's kind of clear that they're kind of their passion for the hobby, and again, kind of like all high tides raises all ships. That kind of that energy kind of comes off. And it's what I always say is like, I couldn't agree more, because it would be very weird for me to disagree in any way, shape, or
Yeah, I mean, yeah. So that, I mean, those are the people that I'm, you know, I mean, Kiana Shaw and Laura and Brian Monk putting out the TTRPG safety tools.
Yeah.
Those are people that are doing, you know, the work and that are doing it in a way that builds community. And those are really inspiring people.
No, wow, no. Again, a fantastic list, and yeah, especially if anyone listening hasn't heard of any of those names, search them on Twitter. Educate yourself. You're again, they're all wonderful people. And speaking of wonderful people, I guess we want to hear about like some of the stuff that you're working on at the moment, and tangentially, where can people stay up to date about it all?
Well, you can follow on Twitter, which is Arcanist Press, Facebook, Arcanist Press, I think, and Instagram. There's a website. Guess what? arcanistpress.com. And what are we working on? Well, there's one more our Ancestry and Culture book that's probably going to come out in the fall. And I've finished the core S5e rules. I'm now working on the Augmented Operators Registry, which is like the monster manual for super villains. That's what I'm currently working on. But I have a couple projects waiting for me. One is that I'm going to start very shortly. One is I've recently found out I'm going to be having some work published in the next Matt Colville DM Arcadia.
Arcadia, wow!
Project.
Congratulations!
Yeah, so that's fun. Yeah, it's going to be. I don't know. They didn't say I can't say anything.
If you signed anything, it's better to like people know.
I didn't though. There was no NDA, right? So anyway, all right. Well, let's just say is something coming out that's with them that'll appear in the fall, next edition, I guess, issue. I'm also working with a startup to do something that could be really exciting. It's a video game tabletop role-playing game kind of hybrid experience.
Ooh.
So I don't also, there's no NDA there, but so I don't want to give away too much, but it basically takes a couple very familiar kind of game formats and video game formats and can serve as a kind of downtime mechanic for in between your tabletop sessions.
Interesting.
Right. So like imagine like an idle clicker kind of game, but it's your D&D character. And so every time you come back to play at the table, you've accrued resources and blah, 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 blah. And there's all kinds of other fancy tech going on in there.
A kind of interesting system to almost like gamify like the time between sessions.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think downtime is a problem. I think that a lot of game systems try to solve the challenge of what is good downtime activities. And lots of people in D&D and other people come up with things you can do in your downtime. And there are little mini systems, but I don't think any of them are particularly fun. To be honest, they're mostly just roll some dice at the beginning of your session and find out if you caroused successfully. Like it doesn't, right? It's just kind of like, all right, whatever.
Give me a fishing mini game. I want to, give me the fishing rod. I want to like, the sort of carnival. You get like a little rod. And
or imagine if you had like a Sim Village or an Animal Crossings style thing to do with your character in between sessions, but then you got rewards for doing it that you could then take back into the session, like extra resources. So like that's something we're working on, that the developers, the coders, the serious people, because video games, that is big. That's much bigger fish than we're very small compared to video games. So tabletop role-playing games, are very small. So like they are like, oh, we're going to talk to venture capitalists and do startup money. And I'm like, I don't know. We don't have any money in role-playing games. I've heard about money.
We're pen and paper because we can't afford anything else.
Right. We don't. And you know what? We don't even need trash pans. We just publish it all. It's fine. So no, but seriously. So it's kind of like it's dipping a toe into another world, which is interesting and fun. But who knows what that's going to look like. And then I've got finally Adventure Library is a platform I'm helping to get off the ground. This is the I can't believe I'm saying this, third startup I'm involved in. I've never been involved in anything remotely startup-y or entrepreneurial. Yeah. I was a college professor. You just read books and that was it. But so now I'm involved in all this weird stuff. So the Adventure Library is a web platform and web and marketplace where creators of art, maps, and other digital assets can sell their work to people that want fantasy, science fiction, and horror gaming art and other maps and art assets. So like if you want stock art for your latest book, or you're a DM that just wants something for your home, or maybe you're a self-published fiction author on Amazon and you need cover art, you can come to this website and that's all they have is that kind of art. You don't have to wade through Shutterstock or something looking for, like, you type in gnome on Shutterstock and you get 10,000 garden gnomes.
No, I must admit, as someone who I dip my toes into the stock art pile often. That sounds exceedingly useful,
and it's actually like organizable with high quality art, unlike, for example, Drive-Thru RPG's stock art selection, which is not very easy to use and very limited. And so that's the goal. We're trying to hit that. Like, this is a whole thing that a whole bunch of people find frustrating, and we're going to try and do it better. And also, hey, we take a smaller cut from creators than those other places. So we'll see if we can pull it off. But that's something that could be kind of exciting too.
Honestly, you weren't joking about being a busy bee. it's
I need to learn to say no. That is what I need to do.
That sounds like a problem for future Eugene.
Yes, exactly. That I while I curse past Eugene for saying yes, the thing is, these are all good things. It's not like I'm saying, like, I'm not like, these are things I'm excited about. Yeah. It's just I get tired a lot.
So Eugene, again, thank you so much for taking some time to sit down and have this chat. Again, it's that case of like we've gone over, but I again, that's what I'm here for. I don't like you can't stop a chat when it's this organic. Yeah. Other than that, I don't have as of the release of this podcast, I don't have anything immediately out. And as people listening probably are aware, I've been saying I've got something on the horizon for about 2 months now. It's still on the horizon. Don't worry, just sit tight. I swear something's coming out soon.
The horizon is very far. It's okay. And you know what? As you move towards it, it just keeps moving away.
Yeah. It's honestly, if you want to blame anyone, you should blame future Matt.
That guy.
Or past Matt? I don't know. I'm stuck in a time loop right now. I don't know which version of the Matt I am. But that all aside, you can find me at Whitby Writes, and that way you can keep up to all my antics and everything I'm up to. But other than that, again, I'll give
Oh, no, I didn't mean to interrupt. I was waiting.
Sorry, no.
I would like to add one thing.
Oh, please do.
If you are out there watching this or listening to this, and it is not yet Friday, or it is still by or before Friday, August 27th, I would invite you to consider voting for Ancestry and Culture and the ENnie Awards, which is, like, if you don't know, like the Tabletop Role-Playing Games Academy Awards or whatever.
That's the equivalent, yeah. There will be, right. And yeah, there will be a link down in the description below for literally you just click it and it'll take you right there to vote. You don't even have to do some simple click.
I figured I should probably mention that.
You know what? We need to get it in while we're here. The only other thing we need to do, I would argue the most important matter, which is, Eugene, how do we end a podcast?
How do we end a podcast? So I like to shout expletives and run away myself.
Wow,
no, I was kidding. No,
no. I mean, we can do. I can get some old fashioned like beep sounds. Oh, it'd be great. We can.
No, just telling people where they can find me, and honestly, allowing me, the guest, to thank you for bringing me on and talking. This is a lot of fun. I love getting to talk to people who are having, publishing work, thinking about design. I could talk about that stuff for hours. So thank you for bringing me on. I really appreciated it. Had fun.
No, thank you very much. And this is where I swear and then just